Yes, I do. Not always. Sometimes I'm a charmer.
That's true.
I think, why do you still love it? Why do you still, well, no, if you want to be tough to me, are you obsessed with Elon Musk?
Are you? So are you?
No, he's obsessed with me. He's the one that, and listen, did you see the blurbs on the blurb?
We did.
Yes, we did.
Yeah. Well,
we
I don't know.
we can't read some. We can't read them.
We can't
Kara.
say them all, which is why everybody needs to read the book.
I know. What I did is I replaced blurbs with nasty things tech boys say about me, and I used it for marketing. Because if they want to strafe a woman, great. I'll use it for selling my book. That sounds good to me. They're trying to, as if I'm going to be some delicate flower and melt at their insults. Like, give me a break.
Well, what's interesting about Elon in your book, and you make these points of that there's parts of him that how can you not be kind of a little bit enamored, where he's trying to do solar and trying to work on really serious problems, right? It's not like how do I download music again, like kind of thing. And you do have your P2P ratio, which you can't say. People have to read the book to understand what it is, because this is a clean show. But so how do you cross like these people who think differently, and yet there are some real big concerns?
Well, he's a case study in someone who's lost the narrative rather significantly.
Why did he lose it, do you think, in your view?
I don't know. I'm not his mama. I think COVID played a part in it. I think he's a perfect example of that age range, sort of. I guess it's 30 to 60. He's a little older than that, which makes you wonder how he loves the boob jokes at that age, at 52 or 53, whoever he is. I think that he was doing things that were amazing. I have to say, the cars, and he didn't invent Tesla, but he certainly is a business genius there. And same thing with SpaceX, business genius. He's taken the talents of other people and himself and made it into really interesting businesses. Even the tunnel digging one is cool in a way. Hyperloop is a great idea. So he had big ideas, and I'll tell you, that's what attracted me to him, because everyone else was doing, a digital dry cleaning service. It was so, exhausting.
Should we continue to take him seriously?
I wish we could, but he's sort of he's indulged himself in his manias, and so every day he's tweeting hateful things, and not every day every minute he's doing that. He's not inventing the future. He's inventing, he's reinventing hate is what he's doing. Grievance. He's reinventing grievance.
But at the same time, we are seeing Starship reach new highs.
Sure. Yeah. Well, sure. But he's getting to experiment on the U.S. dime. He's having U.S. contracts, which is, thank you, federal government. Yes, that's right. He is doing that. But there's other people there. I think we attribute, because we have an idolatry of innovators, we think he's the only one, like he's Willy Wonka in there making all the candy. He's not, And so I have a great regard for Gwen Shotwell, a name you don't hear very often.
Right, the president.
Runs SpaceX.
Yeah.
She runs SpaceX. Let's be clear. I mean, she will stand aside for him, but from what I understand, she's the driving force of that company. And Tesla the same way. There's a lot of executives there who, by the way, they're under a great deal of stress now, given all the competition and the fall off in consumer sentiment in general, and in particular with him.
Kara, hang on a second. We just got to do a quick update on news. Just a minute. Just some of the news crossing the Bloomberg, and we're going to come right back to you. We're talking with Kara Swisher, her new book, Burn Book, A Tech Love Story. We're going to come back in just a moment. Right now, though, a quick check on some of the headlines crossing with Charlie Pell.
Thank you very much. Indeed, we are awaiting the Reddit IPO pricing. Micron Technology out with earnings after the close of trading. It is jumping. After earnings, we got Micron up now by just about 14%. First day out for Astera Lab shares. They jumped 72% in their trading debut. Fed Wednesday stocks rallied. We got new records today for the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ. S&P up 46, 52.24. A new high there, up 0.9%. Dow Industrials up 401, up by 1%. NASDAQ up 202, a gain of 1.2%. 10-year 4.27%, with a 2-year 4.61%. Spot gold today also climbing to a record, up $29 the ounce, $21.86, up 1.3%. Crude West Texas Intermediate down 2.1%, 81.68 a barrel. Again, recapping records on Wall Street. S&P up 46, up 0.9%, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pella. Let's get back to our guest, journalist and author Kara Swisher, joining us from Chicago. Her brand new book, A Burn Book, A Tech Love Story. Hey, Kara, I do want to, one more on Elon, and then we're going to move on.
Sure.
Hopefully.
He's the character of the moment. So
he really is. And you've known him for years, and you write about in the book that
Yeah.
you knew him in the early years, the PayPal years.
Oh, when he had his not PayPal, he wasn't PayPal. He didn't create PayPal. He created X.com.
Right,
just
right.
For people to know.
So,
everyone says he founded PayPal. He did not found PayPal.
He's obviously
he had a company,
evolved since then. And I'm wondering.
he had a company called.
Go ahead.
Finish. He had a company called Zip2. That was a Yellow Pages online thing. Then he went to X.com, and then he started doing the more interesting things.
So he evolved obviously since then, and he's evolved to where he is now. Are you optimistic that this evolution could continue, and you could see a different Elon Musk in a few years?
No, I don't. I think he's well past the sell-by date at this point. He's devolved is what's happened. He was really interesting. What's interesting, I get a lot of flack for liking him then. It was a lot to like. There's a lot to like, especially compared to other people. And I know he had his problems. I'm aware. We wrote about them extensively on our site, the issues around sexual harassment and racial issues at the factories. Again, it was a problem throughout Silicon Valley. We also wrote about Uber. But no, I think he's just in love with himself and his fans, and he's got people slavishly licking him up and down all day. And I think rich people, the deleterious effects of wealth on your psyche in this case, and also the radicalization of online right-wing conspiracy swamps has really gotten a hold of him. I don't know how he's going to get out.
Hey, Kara, before we go any further into the book, in the book, you talk a lot about, obviously, the tech industry, the folks you've, reported on, talked to, but you also talk about your dad and his passing, and you were very young, how that shaped you. You also talk about your conversations with Steve Jobs. A lot of this just kind of resonated with me and really struck me on just, the idea of facing mortality in general, how that, both of those, obviously not apples to apples, but how that shaped you as an individual and your professional life, and maybe how you approach things and even report on things.
Very much. And I know this is a real selling point, but the book is about death and about life, creation and destruction, which is what the tech industry is about, right? That things go, come and go. And my own life, I have that resonant with my dad dying at a young age, my wonderful father dying at a young age, and the impact it had on me, which gave me an early sense of mortality that stuck with me, which meant I had no time to waste. I must get things done. I must change and grow and shift because I didn't have that kind of time. And I think Steve Jobs had a similar sentiment in general, and then in particular when he got sick. Most of the things he created that we think of him as famous for, although he had a long career, was in that last few years he lived. The iPhone, just a lot of stuff got created when his mortality was weighing on him. He gave a great speech at Stanford about that. And so I think we really did spark on that issue of time's a wasting. Let's get going.
You spent a lot of time in the book talking about Steve Jobs, and he's not one of the characters that you write about him in a way that I think.
You seem to like him.
Yeah, you do. You really seem to.
I did like him.
Very clear.
And I'm wondering what he would think
of. He's a difficult guy.
Right.
By the way, often only on product that I ever saw him be difficult, but he had his warts. There's no question.
What would he think about where we are today politically?
Oh, he was much more liberal, but in the traditional sense, I think. He always was trying to reach out. He spent a lot of time talking to Rupert Murdoch, trying to get him to stop being so Rupert Murdoch-y. He always was trying to find, I wouldn't say he's a peaceful person, because that's clearly not the case. But I do think he was a seeker, as he was widely read. One of the things I liked about him was that he read widely, and he had other experiences that had nothing to do with tech, and he had a sense of design and a very big respect for privacy. That's for sure. He also could see around corners. Like, he talked about podcasting with me very first of all. He talked about privacy with me very early. Talked about the problems of social media being a really toxic business model early on. And it wasn't just in his self-interest. I think he thought that. I think he would have hated some of what's going on. Some of it he would have liked.
Stories that didn't make the book, were there a lot?
A lot. It's largely, if everyone's asked me that, I have a lot, and as I'm on this book tour, I'm like, oh, remember that? Or someone will write me, do you remember when I was like, Yeah, I don't know. I just, I feel like if I've forgotten them, they weren't important, right?
Yeah.
Or, I don't have a lot about Yahoo. I wrote a lot about Yahoo's ups and downs over the years, and I just didn't think it mattered at this point. Like I put in the amount that I thought mattered. Certain companies, there was a company someone mentioned the other day, and I wrote a lot about it, and I was like, oh, yeah, like that. Like I run thousands and thousands of stories and interviewing thousands of people, and so I don't know. It's gone. Sorry.
No, that's okay. But like we talked about Elon, Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg's in the book, Sheryl Sandberg, Dave Goldberg, Bill Gates, Reid Hoffman, everybody who's anyone in the tech industry over the last couple of decades and then some. If you had one person that you could just sit down and just go everywhere and anywhere, alive or not, who would it be?
It'd still be Steve. He was the most interesting interview I did. There's a lot of interesting ones I really enjoy. It depends. Satya Nadella I find really interesting because he's had a very interesting life being an immigrant. He has family challenges. His two of his kids have learning issues and quite severely. He's a real person. I think, I'm trying to think I always like talking to Barry Diller. He's just fantastic. And he's someone who changes and shifts.
Yeah.
Not just that, he's so smart. A lot of stuff he said when I go back and look at it is spot on. I just did an interview with him about copyright and AI, and he was the first to that, understanding that. I just think he's funny. I just think he's smart. I think he thinks about a lot of things. I always enjoy talking to him. I'm trying to think of who in tech. I like talking to Sam Altman. He's got a very quick mind, and he always did. And it's really developed. I like anyone who developed. I have to say, someone living, Mark Cuban. He's a gas. He's interesting.
I love him on Shark Tank. I'm a little obsessed with that show.
Beyond that, he's a really thoughtful person and smart. He did a whole thing on DEI on Twitter, and I literally was like, Godspeed, Mark. Like these people are just going to call you names, including Elon Musk. He's like, you're a moron. He's very thoughtful and has progressed.
Kara, I do want to. We only have a couple minutes left, and I wanted to get a few more questions in. You didn't talk at all about this in the book, but politics in San Francisco. I know in the past you toyed with the idea of running for mayor of San Francisco. You were very serious about it at a certain point. Given what's going on in San Francisco now, and your prominence, your love for the city, would you ever consider that again?
No, I had 2 kids during COVID instead, 2 more kids. So no, I don't have the time to do that. I have 2 toddlers. Going on in San Francisco, actually San Francisco is solving the problem. Other cities are now suffering from what San Francisco initially, San Francisco is always first, good or bad, right? And so they're doing some innovative things. They're trying to change things. Most cities are suffering because of COVID and the fall off in commercial real estate and the changes in work. And San Francisco got a hit first. And I think look, guess what's happening in San Francisco right now? All the AI companies are there now. Yeah. All the important AI.
Everyone's moving back.
Done there. Oh, yeah, they are. Oh, the guys who just kicked it in the teeth and then ran off, they're back because it's the best place on earth for innovation still. And so it's the most beautiful place, and we have our problems. We're not running away from it. But we also have it is a magical place, and it always has been, through the summer of love to the gold rush to everything else. It's a physically beautiful place. It always has ideas, and I do believe in analog in some places. And I have to say, in history, it will go down as one of the great important cities of humanity.
All right, we just have 30 seconds.
And I'm running for mayor now. No, I'm not. I love
Come on, we just want a headline. You know that. Hey, 30 seconds.
No, I'm sorry.
No, 30 seconds. How would you advise a Kara Swisher just beginning her career today? Because media has changed dramatically, very quickly, and forgive me for not giving you more time.
That's okay. Be exactly who you were and are. That's what I'd say. You're pretty good.
Amen, sister. Amen. Listen, good luck. We really enjoyed the read. And thank you so much for giving us such a big chunk of time. So appreciate it. Kara Swisher, everybody, thank you. Her new book is Burn Book, A Tech Love Story. Got to say, there's so many great tidbits about being in the green room with individuals, being on stage with Mark Zuckerberg and others, and just getting into a lot of the topics that you and I talk about a lot day to day.
Also just interesting on the business side, hearing how the audiobook is outselling the print book.
I love listening
to the
podcast
podcast effect.
Walk the dogs, did a lot of things.
Hey, let's go to Washington, D.C. now for a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. The Justice Department now considering whether to allow Julian Assange to plead guilty to a reduced charge of mishandling classified information. Sources tell the Wall Street Journal the WikiLeaks founder, who is fighting a drawn-out legal battle with the British government to avoid extradition to the U.S., has had preliminary discussions with DOJ officials about what a plea deal might look like. Assange faces charges in the U.S. for publishing thousands of confidential U.S. military records and diplomatic cables around 2010. Ukraine's prime minister says he's hopeful the U.S. can unlock military aid to his country as early as this month. Dennis Miles spoke with Bloomberg News from our bureau in Brussels.
Nearest time, this month or maximum next month, we will have this good news from United States, and United States will join to European Union, to G7 coalition. Military and financial support of Ukraine in this battle with Russia.
Prime Minister Dennis Miles also says a request from Ukraine's military to draft up to 500,000 soldiers might not need to be that high. Donald Trump and several co-defendants won permission to appeal a Georgia judge's ruling allowing Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis to remain on the state election interference case. Superior Court Judge Scott McAfee says the Georgia Court of Appeals can review the decision that Willis's romance with the special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, created an appearance of impropriety, but that the case can still move forward. The government is not going to pay for those anti-obesity medications. Tens of thousands of prescriptions are being written every week for drugs like Zepbound and Wegovy. The Congressional Budget Office found covering the drugs at their current prices would actually cost U.S. health programs more than it would save. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris. This is Bloomberg.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Micron Technology shares surging more than 16% after ours, up 16.5% right now. Micron is the largest American maker of computer memory chips, jumping after delivering a strong revenue forecast for the current quarter, boosted by demand for AI hardware. Again, after ours, we got Micron now up by 16.4%. Records for the U.S. stock market today. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all pushing higher. S&P at 52.24, up 46 points today, up 0.9%. Dow Industrials up 401. That was a gain of 1%. NASDAQ, the composite index, up 202, up by 1.3%. 10-year 4.27% with a 2-year 4.60%. Spot gold surged to a record up 1.3%, 2,186 on gold. West Texas Intermediate crude down 1.5%, 81.53 a barrel on WTI. Bitcoin now up 5.9%, $67,500 on Bitcoin. So traders sent stocks to records today as the Fed signaled that it is on track to cut rates for the first time since the onset of the pandemic. The Fed, the big story today. Katie Kaminsky is Chief Research Strategist and Portfolio Manager at Alpha Simplex, and she was a guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
They want to cut. It's just they're trying to get enough evidence in the data to do so. So I think there's definitely a desire to cut rates for concern of potential impact on financial conditions. But if they're not seeing enough evidence, what kind of central bank is going to cut rates when inflation is high?
And again, stocks at a record. S&P up 46 to 5,224, up 0.9%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. All right, everybody, as you know, we were just talking with Kara Swisher, well-known and longtime reporter on the tech industry, and well-known for her conversations with the individuals and companies that have and are disrupting, innovating for better or worse, which is really kind of interesting that one of the takeaways from her book, Tim, was that, all right, somebody's a leader and they either go public and they're doing well, and then all of a sudden some other company comes, and kind of eats their lunch, if you will.
I mean, look at recent history, for example. I believe that if you go to I haven't been there for years, but if you went to Facebook's headquarters.
I'm sorry, they're now called Meta?
Sorry, Meta Platforms headquarters. When I was there years ago on a reporting trip, I believe it was the former campus of Sun Microsystems. And when they built their headquarters there, Mark Zuckerberg wanted to make a point of reminding everybody that they're on the former headquarters of Sun Microsystems. So the Facebook sign at the time, on the back of it, it still said Sun Microsystems. So when you were driving out of the facility, it was still there.
AOL.com.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just...
It's you're absolutely right.
And I don't know whether the cycles are faster than, I don't know how you, what do you liken it to?
There's also the Microsoft example, where a lot of people left Microsoft for dead after antitrust issues in the early 2000s. And certainly you had companies like Facebook emerge as a result of Microsoft that was less powerful. But look what they're doing now.
Apple had its struggles in a big
totally
way, right? So, you think about these, it's some that kind of figure out their way to come back and others that just go to the wayside. So this is what gets us to this next story that we want to do with Rachel Metz. It's about OpenAI, which has been at the center of all things artificial intelligence ever since Microsoft did that $10 billion investment in the company. That was January of last year, right? And it's what got us all talking about AI, which has been around for a long time, but obviously this is kind of a whole other level. But anyway, that's what got us talking about it. Rachel, of course, is Bloomberg News AI reporter. She's with us from San Francisco. I think she went to the teacher and said, can we have class outside today? Because that's what it looks like. Rachel, good to have you here with us. Your story about OpenAI now sprinting to keep up with the startups. Remind us about this company, why they've been so much a part of the AI conversation and why they're now kind of trying to keep up.
Sure. So OpenAI, I mean, they've been doing interesting stuff for quite a while, but ChatGPT, I think, is what got a lot of people really talking about them in late 2022. And in the time since, a lot of other companies have been working on generating video. So it's like you type in some words, like a teddy bear walking down the street, for instance, and the AI model produces a very short video of that sort of thing, hopefully. And a few companies are working on this kind of stuff, and OpenAI is now saying, hey, wait, we're working on this too, and we can do it as good or better than you can.
Can they?
That is an excellent question. They have this model, Sora, which
the videos are pretty cool.
Good.
Freaked me
They
out.
do look really cool.
I didn't know there were woolly mammoths where you were able to film woolly mammoths.
They're real,
back.
aren't they?
I mean, they existed a while ago.
Yeah, they're real. They did exist a while ago. No, I mean, it's hard to say actually how good it is because it's still a research project. They have not said when they will release it as a consumer product.
I will say it is so good it's scary, Rachel. That's how I would, that was my impression of it.
Well, but you have to keep in mind that they're just showing you what they want you to see, right? Like we haven't gotten access to it directly. And I mean, a handful of people outside the company have access right now. They're creators, but it hasn't been revealed yet what all those people are working on. So it's hard to say how good it really is, right? If you can't actually try it yourself. At least that's how I feel about these things. If I can't try it, how good is it really?
Okay, so I think that's a really fair, that's why you're the AI reporter. I think that's a really fair way to put it. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other AI startups. I mean, OpenAI gets a lot of the attention because of all the money that it's received and the drama that we had in the fall with the board and Sam Altman and the Microsoft partnership, of course. But tell us about some of the other companies that are working on AI-generated video right now.
Sure. Well, one of the biggest names is a company called Runway. And to be fair, they've been working on this stuff for several years now. And they put out the first model that sort of like anybody could access. That was last year. It was just about a year ago, actually, that I wrote a story about like, hey, you can now use this. So Runway has this AI model called Gen 2, and it's text to video. So you type in a prompt and it gives you a short video. They've made a lot of progress over the past year, allowing people to make videos that are higher resolution, that are longer. And there's other companies, one called Pika. Pika is a company that just released their first model late this year. Stability AI has a model of their own called Stable Video, and a company called Piper has their own model as well. So I tried out all of these in the course of reporting this story just to get a sense of where they're at.
But the race is on, and it's, interesting. We were just, talking with Kara Swisher, and just this idea of, companies kind of disrupting one another, right? And you think there's a leader, and then somebody else comes out, and all of a sudden, and what an interesting week where we have, Apple, doubling down on its partnership with Google when it comes to AI. Like, it's just, there's a lot of movement going around, or going on, or people acquiring companies and so on and so forth. So, as you look at this space, it just feels like there's a lot of new companies, and it's curious kind of where they all ultimately will land and who will ultimately survive. Or will they all? I don't know.
Yeah, at this point, it seems to me like it's still quite early stage. Like, it can be a challenge just to get a video produced with a text prompt that actually is showing you kind of what you wanted. So it's still like very early there. But at the same time, I think with Sora, what I've been hearing from companies is that even just OpenAI showing off Sora, not even releasing it yet, is making the existing companies excited. It helped one of them, they said, with recruiting. It's just making people interested in seeing what is possible with these tools. Even if that's a little ways out, I think they're still pretty positive that competition is actually really helpful at this point.
Rachel, we know what it takes for self-driving. We know what it takes for the large language models. What does it take compute-wise to make one of these videos?
That is a really good question. It takes a lot. Off the top of my head, I don't know like exactly how it
but
would
it's
compare
intensive.
to generating. Yeah, to generating like a single image, but you can imagine like a single image is a teeny fraction of what is in a video, right? And if you multiply that out over time, you're getting in orders of magnitude higher for like 10 seconds of video versus like 100 frames of just images. So yeah, it's a lot. More compute, more money, more memory.
We've actually got the, I think, OpenAI Sora video up. And
That's a cute dog.
It's a cute dog. It's all not real, folks. It was generated. I have to say, Rachel, we're showing it up
Are those
for
cute fish?
our YouTube and our streaming folks.
Some guy running backwards on a treadmill.
When my husband first showed it to me,
Yeah.
he's like, hey, honey, none of this is real. Like, it's crazy town, right?
Yeah. No, that's a really good thing to be hyper aware of as well. It does increase issues related to misinformation too.
You're real and your background's real, right? Just tell me that.
Yeah, it's fuzzy, but it is real.
Okay. So glad that we could check in with you. As always, Bloomberg's Rachel Metz, she's our AI reporter, joining us from the lovely outside area of San Francisco. This is Bloomberg.
Catch complete coverage from the world of politics and the world of business on Bloomberg Balance of Power. Tune in for Joe Matthew and Kaylee Lyons tonight at 5 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and television. Three, two, one. On the latest edition of the Bloomberg Business Week podcast, a conversation with journalist and author Kara Swisher with her thoughts on Reddit going public and her new book, Burn Book, a tech love story. Is that okay?
The way I think about culture is they call organizations superorganisms. It's a collection of people, but the collection is greater than the individuals combined. So 1 + 1 is not 2, ideally it's 3 and greater. So if you were to look at a single person, a person has a set of core values, they may have dreams and aspirations. If you kind of map that to an organization, you can also think of the culture as your core values, personal core values turn into corporate core values, your organization's strengths and weaknesses. All those things collectively combined is something that we kind of put a label on it called the culture. A culture is like a muscle memory. It's very hard to change a habit. It's very hard to just say, hey, today we're going to define our culture as XYZ. We're just going to change this way. Like, it doesn't work like that. It's a collection of people's habits. That's like, again, like a superorganism. So you have to like really nudge and create an iterative feedback loop. It's a slowly evolving thing. So that's why it's so critical. Like your day-to-day decision-making, day-to-day operation, everyday execution is really dictated by the culture of your organization, not by a couple of like checklists. It's not what you write on the wall. It's what you do and live and breathe every day. And that is the culture.
Air accident, finances, and with more on that story, here's Bloomberg's Denise Pellegrini.
Charlie, Boeing CFO Brian West has told a Bank of America conference in London that cash outflow will reach $4 billion to $4.5 billion in the first quarter. And he says a plan to reach a $10 billion cash flow target by 2025 to 2026 will be at the far end of that window. Well, for the year, free cash flow will be in the single-digit billions of dollars. Company is set to report earnings for the first quarter in late April, weeks after that January incident when that door plug came out mid-flight. Boeing suspended its forecast for 2024, breaking with tradition of guiding investors for the year as it worked through fixing its processes and the intensifying public scrutiny and all the investigations, of course, on its production standards. Charlie.
And that's Denise Pellegrini reporting. We got Boeing up now by 3.7%. The owner of K Jewelers and Zales, Signet Jewelers, says some couples could be waiting to get engaged this year because of still high inflation and uncertainty about the labor market. Signet today down 12%. Micron after earnings. Micron now up by just about 17%. Those are our top company stories at this hour, and this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, everybody, Tim and I getting ready.
Another thing that startups need to look for is a market that is either started to undergo or is soon going to undergo exponential growth. I think this is actually related to one of the biggest mistakes investors make when evaluating startups. Investors always say, well, what's your growth rate? We care about the growth rate. Investors will forgive smallish revenue today if it's growing quickly. For some reason, people don't think about markets this way. But if you think about the most important startups, they are the ones that I start in small markets that are growing very, very quickly. 11 years ago, the market for iPhone apps was $0. It's now huge. And I think if you only think about the TAM today, you'll make a big mistake. What you really want to do is identify a market that's going to grow every year and be able to ride that up elevator.
Welcome to the digital age. Are you struggling to stand out here? Don't worry. Meet Blue TV, who is your digital superhero.
Blue TV is a multi-purpose online media network that also provides digital marketing services. We are based in Islamabad, Pakistan. We are expert in creative marketing, social media and digital marketing, search engine optimization, web design, page rank, and SERPs, video editing, recording and production.
So, what are you waiting for? Pick up the phone and call or WhatsApp Blue TV on given number, or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/blue.online.tv.
With Blue TV, your business growth will be skyrocketed.
I want a bank that shows me what I spend instantly.
We're Monzo. Give us a go. See?
I want a bank that can help me budget for the things I need, like a new leather jacket for Bingo.
We can do that.
Bingo's my cockapoo.
Hi, Bingo.
It's a real faff to sign up.
It takes less than 10 minutes.
Race you.
You're on. Time's up. How'd you get on?
It's a draw.
Is it? We hear you, Bingo. You make Monzo Monzo.
My general advice is continue to seek out companies or people that are maybe one stage or two stages ahead of you. And I think this is generalizable to not just to startups, but anyone seeking fast growth in their own professional lives, in their careers too. What does greatness look like? Try to seek out people who've been there, done that before, and then try to not connect with one, but try to interview 3, 5, 10 people to see what is a general pattern of greatness that look like that will get you to the next level of the company, next stage, maybe a year, 12 months from now, 24 months from now. Seek out people who kind of went down the path a few times. Then you'll start to find this pattern that start to emerge. What are things that you need to have 12 months from now, 24 months from now that you currently don't have? Then try to build a path towards that. It's almost like Amazon's or Jeff Bezos' mantra of working backwards. Think about what your end game or next stage look like, and then figure out your steps to getting there, and who do you need to work with, upgrading or coaching your existing team or recruiting from somewhere else to really level your leadership. Because ultimately, the job of a CEO is to do 3 things, right? One is get the strategy right for your company, making sure it's executed, get the right teams onboarded, getting the resources, whether it be fundraising or allocating your resources. So it's strategy, people, or team, figuring out how you need to navigate those things to get to the next level.
Right?
It weakened quite a bit.
What is
We're
up with that?
151.
That is
Well, there was a
odd.
Nikkei report saying that the BOJ is weighing. I'm out of time. We'll have to tune into the show.
Hey, Doug, 3 words for you at some point.
At some point.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for Tim and me. We'll see you tomorrow. Don't go anywhere. Balance of Power starts right now.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide. Welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew.
The Fed holds rates steady, raises its inflation outlook, but still predicts 3 cuts this year. We'll have more with Michael Bright of the Structured Finance Association.
Donald Trump suggests he would support a 15-week abortion ban, with reproductive rights a key issue, of course, in this election cycle. Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois joins us this hour for more on her legislation aimed at protecting IVF.
And Congress is racing the clock up against a midnight Friday funding deadline, but Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell warning the work is likely to extend to the weekend. So, Joe, once again, it's going to be a matter of the clock as of this hour, 5 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday. Yep. We still have not yet seen the text.
Yeah, supposed to come out Sunday. Then we were told Monday. Now, well, Tuesday. Now, it could be Thursday. Apparently, this could drop at any moment. Kaylee, the funding deadline is midnight Friday. This is making things very difficult for lawmakers who wanted to avoid a shutdown, considering the job left to be done.
Absolutely. So we still have remaining questions this evening about fiscal policy, but we did get a bit more clarity on the monetary policy side today, as the Fed did hold rates steady at their meeting, maintaining their outlook, though, for 25 basis point cuts, 3 of them this year. Chair Jay Powell spoke earlier to reporters.
We believe that our policy rate is likely at its peak for this tightening cycle, and that if the economy evolves broadly as expected, it will likely be appropriate to begin dialing back policy restraint at some point this year. The economic outlook is uncertain, however, and we remain highly attentive to inflation risks.
Joining us now with more here in Washington, Bloomberg's Michael McKee, our chief international economics and policy correspondent. He, of course, was in the room with Chairman Powell, asked a question of him. But the big takeaway seems to be that while the Fed does think inflation may be higher than previously thought this year, or by the time we get to the end of it, they still would like to cut rates multiple times, maybe be more tolerant of that higher inflation.
But it was a very close call today, and that's what was interesting, because the Fed saw stronger growth, lower unemployment, and higher core inflation this year, but just barely maintained the 3 rate cuts. They had 9 members, 9 of the 19 members saw 2 cuts or fewer, and 10 saw 3. If one person had changed their vote, then we would have had 2 cuts, and the markets probably would have had a completely different reaction.
You asked Powell about inflation dynamics, whether we see more one-off increases that end up fading away, or whether there's a secular turn here. He didn't seem to have a perfect answer for that. How concerned is he about this?
He said, we have the same questions that you do, which made me feel good, I guess. They think, in general, that we saw some one-offs, so maybe turn of the year, increases in insurance and things like that, but they aren't sure yet, which means they want more time. But there was enough that scared them that they did raise the forecast for core inflation next year. So at this point, they're keeping their fingers crossed that their forecast will be okay. But a significant number of them did vote to move up their own inflation forecast. So it's possible, if we see another bad inflation report, that at the next time they do this dot plot, we'll go down to 2.
Michael McKee, thank you. It's great to have you back in the nation's capital as we enjoy each Fed day. Also in focus, progress on the language for a funding deal to prevent a partial government shutdown. We just haven't seen it yet. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell talked about it earlier. Here he is.
My assumption and what I've told our members is we're likely to be here this weekend. That will be determined, however, by how long it stays in the House. What we have recently done, and I think hopefully will work again, is that in return for a certain number of amendments, we can finish it quicker, hopefully, than putting us in a position of shutting down the government.
Let's bring in Jonathan Tamari from Bloomberg Government. He's just back from the Hill. Jonathan, great to see you. This is all about the clock at this point. How long the House holds the bill, as Mitch McConnell references, 72 hours is the rule. So everyone has a chance to read this. The Freedom Caucus wants to get that time. But those are the same 30 members who would probably vote against this thing anyway. So the Speaker has a decision to make. Can he just bring it to the floor now if he wants to?
He could. I mean, this is a rule that's essentially an informal rule. It's not written into law. It's not, in the Constitution or anything. So he could. And Republicans, House Republicans are signaling that they are more likely to ignore that 72-hour rule, bring it out as fast as they can, because lawmakers want to get this done. They don't want to have a partial shutdown, and they're all eyeing this recess that starts next week. They don't want to be here this weekend. Like anybody who's looking at a break, you don't want to work overtime right before you're starting vacation.
Jonathan, you probably yourself would prefer not to work this
wouldn't
weekend
mind.
as well.
Nothing personal
there. Of course, while this funding battle is still ongoing, or at least the race against the clock is, there were other things going on the Hill today, including a meeting with Senate Republicans, which was zoomed into by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Of course, this comes after Chuck Schumer, the Democratic leader, called for new elections in Israel. What came out of that meeting? And does it influence at all the path forward for supplemental funding, which of course has already passed the Senate, but very much remains in question in the House, not just for Israel, but Ukraine as well?
Yeah, I don't think it will affect supplemental funding for Israel specifically. I think there's still bipartisan support for sending money to Israel, although there's Democrats who want to put conditions on that aid and Republicans who don't. The Democrats are pretty much divided on it. I think what Netanyahu's visit today, combined with Schumer's speech, does is it underscores how Netanyahu personally has become essentially a partisan figure, where he is now much more affiliated with the Republican Party. Democrats oppose Netanyahu by and large. And so that could have an effect in the future of how Israel is viewed. I think at the moment there's still widespread support for Israel, but you see the parties moving in different directions, especially around this specific Israeli government.
Once we get through this, it's unclear in terms of the funding mechanism, whether we shut down or get a continuing resolution. Once we get through this, will we have a sense in the next 24 hours or so what the answer is?
On the continuing resolution?
If that's needed. We talked yesterday about maybe a brief weekend shutdown, but they're pushing this to the line now. We're going to be in it next week.
They really are. I think they'll find a way to get it done over the weekend. The Senate and the House, they have a way of, when there's a recess coming, they're speeding things up. The issue is that over the weekend, a shutdown, the government isn't really open over the weekend generally anyway. So we'll see if they need a CR. I think we'll have a better sense depending on when they actually put the text out. If they can get it out early tomorrow, maybe they can get it done on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. If it keeps getting kicked back and days and days and days, we might need that short-term stopgap to prevent a shutdown next week.
All right, well, we're still waiting at this hour. Jonathan Tamari of Bloomberg Government, thank you so much. Elsewhere, President Biden toured an Intel campus outside of Phoenix, Arizona today, just after the Commerce Department announced $20 billion in grants and loans to help fund an expansion of that company's semiconductor factories. Next on the president's agenda is Texas, where he'll be meeting with donors in Dallas and Houston. The visit rounding out Biden's trip to 3 different border states this week. Joining us now with more from Texas is our Texas Bureau Chief, Bloomberg's Julie Fine. So, Julie, we know that Texas is a deep red state. What is Biden's reception likely to be in the state today?
The president's reception is expected to be very good. He's got 3 fundraisers, 2 in Dallas, 1 in Houston, expected to net over $5 million between the 3 fundraisers. While Texas has been a very good cash register for Republicans, there are a lot of Democrats here as well. So the president is expected to get a big haul and a very big reception when he arrives.
We've got some news from the Supreme Court. This landed around this time yesterday, Julie Fine, allowing the state of Texas to begin arresting and deporting people who enter the country illegally. How is this playing locally, and what does it mean for Governor Greg Abbott?
Well, currently there's a stay on this, and this is now back in front of the Fifth Circuit. This has been playing locally here for some time. It's called Senate Bill 4, and it has been a very challenging issue for lawmakers here in Texas. Well, it passed by the Republican House and it passed by the Republican Senate and signed by the governor. There are a lot of people that are very uncomfortable with this bill, but again, it was expected to pass. It did pass, and here in Texas, it is a very big part of the election this time around. So a lot of eyes are on this law and what will happen next. Now, the Texas law enforcement has been prepared for this. There is law enforcement all up and down the border right now. The question is, when will they be able to arrest and deport. They are waiting on the decision from the court. There is no word yet exactly when that will come down.
Well, Julie, given the history of the Fifth Circuit in the state of Texas, is there any idea, prevailing thinking, as to how exactly the court is likely to rule whenever that time comes?
There is no prevailing thinking right now. There is a question whether or not it is split. However, this is one of the most conservative courts in the nation. But there were questions today in the arguments about this bill and its implementation. So this is one that could be a little different for the court to hear. We'll have to wait and see what happened. But that is a great point, Kaylee. This is one of the most conservative courts in the nation.
Julie, thanks for being back with us. Bloomberg's Julie Fine, our Texas bureau chief, here on Balance of Power. Coming up, we'll be joined by Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois. An important conversation on women's reproductive rights and other business in the Senate. It's next on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
Okay, today I'm going to talk about how to succeed with a startup. Obviously, more than can be said here in 20 minutes, but I will do the best I can. The most important thing, the number one lesson we try to teach startups, is that the degree to which you're successful approximates the degree to which you build a product that is so good, people spontaneously tell their friends about it. Startups always ask us for the secret to success. They always want to believe it's something other than this, because this is really hard to do. But this is it. If you can build a product that is so good, people spontaneously tell their friends about it, you have done 80% of the work that you need to be a really successful startup. If you think about the most successful companies you know, Google, Facebook, whatever, you probably found out about them because a friend of yours said, you got to try this, it's great. So this is the bar. Something that people love so much they tell their friends about it. One important indicator for a product like that is a product that's simple to explain and easy to understand. If you can't explain in a few words what you do, and if at least some people don't say, oh, that's pretty interesting, that's usually a mistake. It's usually a sign of unclear thinking or a need that is not big enough.
I want a bank that shows me what I spend instantly.
We're Monzo. Give us a go. See?
I want a bank that can help me budget for the things I need. Like a new leather jacket for Bingo.
We can do that.
Bingo's my cockapoo.
Hi, Bingo.
But it's a real faff to sign up.
It takes less than 10 minutes.
Race you.
You're on. Time's up. How'd you get on?
It's a draw.
Is it? We hear you, Bingo. You make Monzo Monzo.
From the UK, and I'm the inventor of the gel razor. And today I'm looking for an angel investor to fund my project, the gel razor, whether that's a working concept and working prototype, or manufacturing possibilities with investment, or to get me a licensing deal secured. If you go in any supermarket today, you will see packets of razors sold separately with tins of mousse or gel. Hence I did that, but all in one. The idea is you pressurize the handle. The gel flows through the reservoir up to the head of the razor, coating the blade, ready for shave. My target market is 18 plus, male or female, male blue version, female pink version. What I'm looking for in an investor is someone who's passionate, determined, shares my vision. That's an important step for me, and willing to succeed as I wanted to succeed myself. Patented in the UK in 2021 September. With copyright protection, I have a logo for the gel razor, which you will see on my LinkedIn profile. Currently working with a company in the US who have done me a lovely sell sheet. Big up to them guys. So if you're interested, contact me on LinkedIn profile, Paul J. Gwilt, GWILT, or email me at mufc219@gmail.com.
That this ruling was wrong and has to be changed and remedied in some way. But also, too, Republicans need to be better about talking about women's health as a whole, as a priority for the healthcare system in the country.
So far this year, 26 bills have been introduced that would establish what's known as fetal personhood and could impact IVF. Joe and Kaylee, Bloomberg News reports these types of laws could lead to abortion bans if passed.
Definitely legislation to follow at the state level, Tyler. Meanwhile, at the state level and really at the national level in this election cycle, obviously this is an issue that is coming up. How have we seen this characterized when we think about former President Trump, who of course is touting 15 weeks versus President Biden?
Right. It was interesting to hear former President Trump come out and actually put a time frame. The first time we've heard him say a number on the type of time frame we could see for a national abortion ban, also saying that he'd be in support of exceptions. You know, the Republican strategist I spoke to there, Lisa Miller, said that we should expect to see this maybe perhaps more framed as a health care conversation. You know, during the State of the Union, President Biden actually had abortion written into the script, and he ended up taking that out, instead talking about this issue as reproductive rights. So we'll have to watch if on the campaign trail we start to see the messaging around abortion, IVF, and other reproductive health care issues come up like this.
All right, Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall, great reporting. Thank you so much. And we'll have more on this coming up in just a few minutes. Senator Tammy Duckworth, a Democrat from Illinois who has put forward legislation to protect IVF, is coming up next on Balance of Power. Meanwhile, we do have some breaking news. Reddit, the IPO of which is supposed to begin trading tomorrow, Thursday, is set to price that IPO at $34 per share. That's the top end of the range that had been reported. Again, Reddit pricing that IPO at $34 per share. This is Bloomberg TV and radio.
Another thing that startups need to look for is a market that is either started to undergo or is soon going to undergo exponential growth. I think this is actually related to one of the biggest mistakes investors make when evaluating startups. Investors always say, well, what's your growth rate? We care about the growth rate. Investors will forgive smallish revenue today if it's growing quickly. For some reason, people don't think about markets this way. But if you think about the most important startups, they are the ones that I start in small markets that are growing very, very quickly. 11 years ago, the market for iPhone apps was $0. It's now huge. And I think if you only think about the TAM today, you'll make a big mistake. What you really want to do is identify a market that's going to grow every year and be able to ride that up elevator.
Welcome to the digital age. Are you struggling to stand out here? Don't worry. Meet Blue TV, who is your digital superhero.
Blue TV is a multi-purpose online media network that also provides digital marketing services. We are based in Islamabad, Pakistan. We are expert in creative marketing, social media and digital marketing, search engine optimization, web design, page rank, and SERPs, video editing, recording and production.
So, what are you waiting for? Pick up the phone and call or WhatsApp Blue TV on given number, or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/blue.online.tv.
With Blue TV, your business growth will be skyrocketed.
I want a bank that shows me what I spend instantly.
We're Monzo. Give us a go. See?
I want a bank that can help me budget for the things I need, like a new leather jacket for Bingo.
We can do that.
Bingo's my cockapoo.
Hi, Bingo.
It's a real faff to sign up.
It takes less than 10 minutes.
Race you.
You're on. Time's up. How'd you get on?
It's a draw.
Is it? We hear you, Bingo. You make Monzo Monzo.
My general advice is continue to seek out companies or people that are maybe one stage or two stages ahead of you. And I think this is generalizable to not just to startups, but anyone seeking fast growth in their own professional lives, in their careers too. What does greatness look like? Try to seek out people who've been there, done that before, and then try to not connect with one, but try to interview 3, 5, 10 people to see what is a general pattern of greatness that look like that will get you to the next level of the company, next stage, maybe a year, 12 months from now, 24 months from now. Seek out people who kind of went down the path a few times. Then you'll start to find this pattern that start to emerge. What are things that you need to have 12 months from now, 24 months from now that you currently don't have? Then try to build a path towards that. It's almost like Amazon's or Jeff Bezos' mantra of working backwards. Think about what your end game or next stage look like, and then figure out your steps to getting there, and who do you need to work with, upgrading or coaching your existing team or recruiting from somewhere else to really level your leadership. Because ultimately, the job of a CEO is to do 3 things, right? One is get the strategy right for your company, making sure it's executed, get the right teams onboarded, getting the resources, whether it be fundraising or allocating your resources. So it's strategy, people, or team, figuring out how you need to navigate those things to get to the next level.
Single Republican, including Senator Britt, has come forward to co-sponsor my legislation. And again, it's very simple. It just says you have the right to access assistive reproductive technology, you have the right to offer it, and you have the right to cover it. It's very simple, and not a single Republican who says that they support IVF has come forward to co-sponsor the bill. In fact, all they've done is put out resolutions and statements saying they support it that have absolutely no protections under the law. And in the House of Representatives in particular, there are over 100 Republicans who've actually signed on to co-sponsor legislation that says a fertilized egg is a person and it is a child outside of the uterus that has equal rights, in some cases more rights than the woman who would carry that fertilized egg. So they can't have it both ways. You can't say a fertilized egg is a human being with more rights than the woman, or at least equal rights, and then also say that you support IVF, because the nature of IVF is that there are going to be non-viable fertilized eggs that must be discarded. In Louisiana, there's already a law in the books that says you can't discard any fertilized eggs.
Well, Senator, we know that you are very passionate about this issue, and we'll look forward to the news of you reintroducing your bill later on this year, as you say. In the meantime, though, there is some more immediate business that the Senate needs to take care of. What is your current understanding of the plan in regard to government funding? Are you expecting to spend the weekend while we see a partial shutdown before you can actually vote on this minibus?
So we are committed to getting this done and not having a government shutdown. It just depends on whether or not my Republican colleagues want to play games and try to introduce amendments. There is a deal that has been agreed to by the lead negotiators on the Senate side. I'm really pleased that a bipartisan partnership between Senators Patty Murray and Susan Collins have moved forward, and they have made a deal with the House. And so they're working on that deal right now. And if that comes to the floor for a vote, and we can pass it in whole without adding any amendments to it, it will pass, and we won't have government shutdown. But if the House attaches any amendments or we attach any amendments, the whole thing could fall apart and we would go well into the weekend. The goal is to get this done without shutdown, which means we would need to pass it by midnight on Friday.
Yeah. Lastly, Senator, from your view on the Armed Services Committee and, of course, your experience with the United States military, do you favor giving a loan to Ukraine if that's the only form in which military funding from the U.S. can pass this Congress?
Well, it wouldn't address the issue at hand, because the problem is, of the $65 billion in the supplemental package for Ukraine, $55 billion of that actually stays in the United States, and it actually goes to American defense manufacturers to replenish America's stockpile. So when we gave them our old Abrams tanks, when we gave them our old F-16s, we need to refurbish and put back into our stockpiles, those weapons, those munitions. And so we can't give Ukraine a loan to pay to American defense manufacturers for U.S. stockpiles. So we're going to give ourselves a loan. So the loan thing doesn't work. And frankly, what we need to do is pass the supplemental that passed out of the Senate with a very strong bipartisan vote. And the House just needs to come forward and pass this legislation now.
Got a lot of balls in the air. Senator Tammy Duckworth, we appreciate you talking about all of this with us today on Bloomberg. Come back and see us. Coming up, takeaways from Fed Chair Jay Powell's news conference following the Fed decision today and the two-day FOMC meeting in Washington. We'll have more ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio. I'm Joe Matthew alongside Kaylee Lyons in Washington with breaking news. As the Justice Department makes clear it's set to sue Apple as soon as tomorrow, accusing the company of violating antitrust laws by blocking rivals from accessing hardware and software features of its iPhone. The case marks the third time the Justice Department has sued Apple for antitrust violations in the past 14 years. This probe's been underway since 2019. Shares of Apple are falling after hours on this report, and it's something that, of course, we're going to be talking a lot more about as we learn more here on Bloomberg. Also today, Federal Reserve officials maintaining their outlook for 3 interest rate cuts this year and moving toward slowing the pace of reducing their bond holdings. Joining us now to get into this a bit more is Michael Bright, Structured Finance Association CEO. Michael, it's great to see you. It looks like we're not going to see any cuts until the second half of the year, I guess May if we get lucky at this point. Is the Federal Reserve running the risk with higher for longer of forcing this economy into a recession? And an eye on the housing market, which I know you're watching.
Yeah. Well, I think that they have to take that risk. I mean, I think that I've been in the camp that they are going to stay a little bit higher for longer. I noticed that, the dot plots today suggested 3 cuts, but on the precipice of only suggesting 2. It's very clear that they're doing exceptionally well on one side of their mandate. Unemployment is very, very low, and that's great. CPI and PCE continue to be sticky high. I think the Fed actually faced potentially a credibility crisis last year with their miss in terms of thinking that inflation would be very transient. So they really had no choice. I think they're going to need to continue to watch the data, but it could tip the economy into recession. It's been a very anticipated recession that the yield curve has been planning for, that the markets have been planning for, is yet to arrive. But I think they're doing the right thing by staying the course and looking at the inflation data as it comes in.
Well, of course, there's no shortage of political commentary around Federal Reserve policy. And what you've consistently heard, especially from progressive lawmakers, initially was concern that rates were going to stay too high and it was going to impact the labor market. Right. When it was clear that labor market impact wasn't happening, it seems that a lot of that messaging has now shifted to housing and the fact that it's very unaffordable, that mortgage rates are incredibly high. How much concern do you have about where we are in housing right now and how much risk may be out there?
Yeah, for sure. This rate lock effect is a real thing where people have 3.5% mortgages and so they don't want to sell their home and they're kind of stuck in their house and so inventory is very low. For the last 2 buying seasons, just anecdotally, you drive around, Maryland, Virginia, D.C. area, you see no for sale signs.
Oh, believe me, I know it.
It's tough. And this year, I came in optimistic. I said people have to get on with their lives, right? People have things that change, they get change jobs, they need to move, etc. So this has to be finally a breaking point. Well, the weather's pretty nice, and I'm still not seeing any for sale signs out there. So the rate lock effect may have a little bit more time to run. As far as the rate impact, if we can find a little bit of a range, which I think that we have, so the 10-year note spiked to 5, but then it kind of came back down in the 4.3 area, and it's sort of holding steady in that regard. If that continues, mortgage spreads should come in a little bit, and that could be a little bit of relief on the rate front, but it's really a supply problem at the end of the day.
We heard from the White House on this. The president's out with a series of proposals to try to unlock some of the stuff we're talking about in the housing market. Kaylee and I spoke with National Economic Council Deputy Director Daniel Hornan about this. We discussed what needs to happen to improve the housing market. This is the view of the White House. Let's listen.
I think we really need an approach on housing policy that goes at putting incentives in place to add to the supply of housing. So his plan that he's sent to Congress would lead to the construction of 2 million homes. But we also need to take action that goes at unlocking the housing market.
But of course, it takes time to build 2 million homes, to get them cleared, to get them permitted. Yep. It takes God knows how much time to get anything past Congress. So is there anything that this administration can do now?
They're working around the edges. I mean, they're trying to make some things cheaper, and I think this realtor settlement could, be a game changer in terms of cost. But again, he's right, and I agree, it is a supply problem. I think not having housing supply in the infrastructure bill that did pass when the president first took office was a major miss. I don't have any particular party to blame for that. I just think that was a real mistake. Everyone has known that this has been an affordable supply problem for a very long time. A lot of that is at the local and state level. It looks like the president is making some pitch for tax credits and subsidies to try and encourage the development of low-income housing, or at least affordable housing. Right. All of that is good, but the NIMBYism is real. This is a pretty sticky problem. I do worry that we may be entering almost a European-style generational shift here where kids live with their parents until their 30s, and it takes a long time to get that first home. I really don't want to get stuck in that trap, but it would take a pretty concerted national effort to build housing supply.
And of course, this is all in the residential real estate realm, but there has been a lot of concern in commercial real estate as well, including increasingly in commercial real estate CLOs, collateralized loan obligations. Basically, you bundle all of this risky debt together. And yet, in just the last 7 months, according to our reporting, the share of troubled assets held by these CRE CLO products has surged fourfold to more than 7.4%. Should we be concerned by that?
Well, I think commercial real estate is a broad term. So office space is obviously struggling quite a bit, and it's still very unclear, when that finally works its way through the system. I mean, anecdotally, we're in a lease that we've been in as a 7-year lease, and we still have 2 years on it, so we're paying our rent on time. But I guarantee you, we're going to look for a cheaper lease when that changes. So it's a slow-moving train in the office space sector. Hotels, leisure industry, shopping centers, moving out to the suburbs, those commercial real estate products have been doing very well. So I'm not in the camp that there's some sort of ticking time bomb out there. I think people have been looking for this shoe to drop for a very long time, and it hasn't. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be vigilant and continue to watch it. I think we just have to work through this sort of structural shift that we're going through in society in terms of the way we relate to work from office, working downtowns. Downtowns are obviously dealing with a lot. I think crime is, especially in D.C., this has been an overhang on some of these things. So you got a lot kind of macro factors that are at play here that all need to be, brought to solution in order to avoid anything catastrophic. But it's worth watching. I just am not in the camp that this is an immediate threat.
All right, Michael Bright, great to see you here in our Washington studio. Thank you so much for joining us. Michael Bright is the Structured Finance Association CEO. Now coming up, we'll turn to our political panel to discuss the takeaways from yesterday's primaries. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
landmark agreement under the CHIPS and Science Act between my administration and Intel for up to $8.5 billion. It's a smart investment. And that's being paired with over $100 billion from Intel, including $30 billion in Arizona and $30 billion in Ohio. It's among the largest private sector investments ever in the history of Ohio and Arizona.
That was President Biden earlier today in Phoenix at Intel's Ocotillo campus. And joining us now is our political panel, Christy Setzer, president and founder of New Heights Communications, and Lauren Tomlinson, partner at Steer PR. Great to see you ladies here in Washington this evening. Of course, Biden hasn't been spending a lot of time here in the district recently. He's been on a grand tour since the State of the Union of many swing states, not just in Arizona, Nevada, but Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia. He's on his way to Texas as we speak. Christy, it's one thing to visit. It's another thing to be visiting with a message that resonates. How would you rate the job the president is doing as he's making this pitch?
I mean, I think today is an unequivocal win. When we look at the announcements that he made, not just in Arizona for Intel, but also the announcement on electric vehicles, I mean, these are things that really matter to people. We're talking about 300,000 jobs when we talk about the Intel announcement. And, you know, when we're talking about phasing out gas cars, that's something that's probably the most significant climate change announcement that he's made throughout his presidency, maybe with the exception of the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's not just campaigning, he's also doing the right thing, and I don't think that we also need to be cynical about it. I think that there are a lot of times in which doing the right thing politically is also the right thing policy-wise, which is also, you know, they're all going to help him.
Well, you wonder sometimes if he's not being cynical enough. We're talking about generational investments, right? That's how they're pitched. This is for your kids and grandkids. That's not going to help you to get votes in November, though, is it?
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, because I love the CHIPS Act. I think it's great that we're investing in this type of technology, especially from a national security perspective, and very imperative. But it is, like, when you're talking about a political win, the messaging is difficult on these issues because, you know, even the EV Act or the EV rule that came out today, you're looking at 2030, I think, is when they're talking about that actually going into place. You know, the manufacturing plant is going to take so long for all those jobs to be realized that people are not going to be feeling that effect
even a
in
second
November.
Biden term would be over.
Exactly. And I think that is the problem, is because so much of what they're doing is the investment and not what have you done for me lately. And people are feeling right now, well, I'm hurting right now, so what am I getting from this right now? And that, I think, is going to be the economy problem for Biden messaging going into November, is because this is like a longer term play. He's going to continue to tell people you're going to be fine. The things I'm doing are going to be great. Biden economics is going to work, but people are going to look and say, well, it hadn't helped me yet.
Yeah, the difficulty of getting a voter to look forward at maybe the future Biden economy versus looking backward at the Trump economy when they're choosing between an incumbent president and essentially the one next removed in terms of incumbency. And on that note, obviously, we also had primaries in a number of states yesterday. No shocker, both of them won handily. And yet, when you look at the actual breakdown, Donald Trump was polling 70 to 80% of the vote across these states. Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis were still getting votes. There is still a chunk of the Republican primary electorate, even knowing he has the nomination locked up, that isn't voting for him. What does that say, Lauren?
Yeah, it was up to 20% of the GOP in some of those states were basically protest votes. So, you know, I think I saw one number where it was, you know, Biden had maybe like 1 in 10 people protest vote against him, and then Trump had 1 in 5 voters protest vote against him, which I think just speaks to the fact that nobody really wanted to see a rematch of 2020. You know, I think it would have been really nice if we had had some different candidates in here, but here we are. So I think people are registering that. You know, they're registering the fact that they didn't want this for the primary. They wanted different younger candidates. And I don't think that that'll necessarily reflect how they end up voting in November, which I think is a lot of what people are predicting. But I think that people, again, they go to the ballot box and they wanted people to know this isn't what I wanted.
Democrats love running against MAGA, it turns out, especially in Ohio, although this just happened in California. We saw it again in the 2 races we were watching most closely, Christy, in Ohio. Bernie Moreno benefited from hundreds of thousands of dollars in Democratic ads. Derek Merrin going to be running against Marcy Kaptur now, thanks to support from Democrats. These were the preferred candidates. Is that going to pay off in November? This is a risky bet, isn't it?
It's a risky bet. It's one that makes me very nervous. It made me very nervous in 2022 when they did it in the midterms as well. But for the most part, it played out well for Democrats. It was a bet that paid off because in most of those cases, and obviously this is what Democrats are betting on in Ohio as well, that you have a weaker candidate in Bernie Moreno. You can sort of think of him as a poor man's Kari Lake.
Wow.
And I don't know if that's true, but I do think that, Donald Trump has a very long and established record of choosing people who win in the primary and lose in the general. Yeah.
Well, and you bring up that happened to a number of Trump-backed candidates in 2022, but something that was raised on this program last night by one of our panelists is Trump wasn't on the ballot in 2022. Mm-hmm. He's going to be at the top in 2024, Lauren. What difference does that make for these candidates that he's endorsed?
Well, it means that there's going to be a lot higher turnout for Trump supporters, and there's going to be a lot of just down ballot ticking. So I don't think that it's fair to compare a midterm result with the presidential, because you're looking at such different results and such different voting patterns as far as turnout. But, I do think that I'm actually curious how much of a split there is this year, considering how disgruntled people are about the choices that they're being given at the top of the ticket. If that results in what we've seen in Georgia happen, where people were voting for Biden at the top and then Republican all the way down the ticket. So, it may be that some people vote Trump at the top and then they change their votes for the bottom, or more likely a lot of votes for Biden and then they still vote Republican down. So, I think this is going to be a really unique election year, I guess is my point.
I don't know if we can call this a win for Democrats, but look at the special election in California as well last night. This was Kevin McCarthy's seat. Of course, he's left the building and he's left town. Vince Fong, the state rep, backed by Donald Trump and Kevin McCarthy himself, did not meet the grade to avoid a runoff. That means Mike Johnson has several more months of a two-seat majority with that seat vacant.
It's somewhat of a win for Democrats. Look, I think the Democrats will be there, for Mike Johnson when they need to be on the big things, but there's also a little bit of schadenfreude in that.
Maybe a little more leverage. Coming up with our panel, the speaker, aforementioned Mike Johnson, says he plans to hold a vote this week on the spending package that we are still waiting to see. We'll be back with our panel with the details. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg TV and radio.
We are committed to getting this done and not having a government shutdown. It just depends on whether or not my Republican colleagues want to play games and try to introduce amendments. There is a deal that has been agreed to by the lead negotiators on the Senate side. I'm really pleased that a bipartisan partnership between Senators Patty Murray and Susan Collins have moved forward.
Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth of Illinois on with us just moments ago as we head for A funding expiration this Friday. As we reassemble our political panel, their take on it. Christy Setzer, president and founder of New Heights Communications, is here along with Lauren Tomlinson, partner at Steer PR. She's pointing at Republicans here playing games. I don't know if that is what will take place in the Senate, but it sure looks like we're going to have a little bit of a shutdown here. Is this going to be a learning experience for anyone, having pushed it this close to the line that we can only help but shut down?
I think it'll be a learning experience for Johnson because I think that he is slowly learning that it is very difficult to gain consensus in the House. And, basically, once you have a deal, you have to really stick to that deal and push it forward and force your members to come along with it. I think that's where the learning is going to occur. I think your rank and file members, some of the ones that have already been telegraphing that they don't support the deal before they've read it, that they don't support additional funding, it doesn't cut enough, all of the same things. Yeah. I think they're not learning anything from this, that shutdowns are expensive and they're not good for the country. And so you actually run counter to your principles there.
Well, Lauren, you mentioned a lot of people are saying no before they've laid eyes on the bill, and yet those people also maybe want 72 hours to read the bill, even though they're ultimately going to vote no for it. Should we just waive that rule, considering this is going to be passed under suspension of the rules? So why would the rules apply in this case?
Yeah, I think fundamentally members should read bills before they pass them, right? Like, that is a good thing for democracy. But yeah, I think at this point, stay up all night and read it and then pass it, right? And then if we need to, because this is a special situation, make sure that you trust leadership enough that you're going to want to vote for the bill. But also, if you don't want to get in this situation, go through the normal appropriations process and pass bills on time.
Pass bills on time.
Novel idea.
This is the comedy portion of the program. So, Christy, after this is done, presuming this gets done, maybe we shut down for a couple of days or there's a CR. We'll get to the fine print at some point here. There's a question about whether there's going to be room for anything else. We talked to Senator Duckworth about Ukraine funding, for instance. There's some big issues that are left remaining that this Congress may not be able to get to as all members go on recess here. And they're reminded that they're in campaign mode in a couple of months. Right. Is the store closed?
I don't know if it's closed. I think it's much harder to get things passed after that point. Look, I was never under the impression that Democrats wouldn't help get the government funded, because we believe in government. We believe in funding it. We believe in running it. We don't tend to take it hostage. Yes, we're going to go through this rigmarole every single time and take it right to the edge, but it's always going to be that Democrats are going to be there in partnership to get things passed. And as it turns out, it seems as though from the minibus that actually some long-held Democratic priorities, things like child care funding, at this point, we don't know, but seem to be in it. So that's good. But that, I think, is where the goodwill ends. I think at that point, then we go back to partisanship and a lot of rancor. I'm very unconfident that some of the big things that I think are incredibly critical, like Ukraine funding, actually come to a resolution.
Well, on that point, Bloomberg spoke with Ukraine's prime minister earlier today and was asked specifically about whether he'd had any reassurances about that aid. This was his response.
Nearest time, this month or maximum next month, we will have this good news from United States, and United States will join to European Union, to G7 coalition, military and financial support of Ukraine in this battle with Russia.
This month or next month, Lauren, is that overly optimistic, or is the House going to suddenly start singing a different tune?
I think that that's realistic. I think that, you have to project confidence a little bit like the Ukrainians are doing, but I actually do think that's a realistic timeline if they can get through this shutdown moment. That has always been Johnson's clear line, is we need to pass our own bills first. We need to make sure that the government is funded. I need to get through this appropriations mess, and then we will turn to Ukraine and Israel funding. And I do actually think that in some ways Donald Trump has freed the Republicans from having to put all of these domestic priorities onto this bill, because he told them that he wants to handle border security himself. So now they can just pass a clean Ukraine funding, and there's enough support between the Democrats and the Republicans that I think that it'll pass.
Interesting today, Speaker Johnson was meeting with his conference on 72 hours and rules like that. The Republican senators had a meeting that Benjamin Netanyahu appeared at. Yeah. Republican senators. There was not a Democrat in the room following Chuck Schumer's speech last week. What does that tell you about where we stand?
Well, it tells you that Netanyahu said he was happy to meet with the Democrats, and Chuck Schumer said no. And the reason he said no is because he thought that if Netanyahu wanted to meet with them separately, first talking to the Republicans and then talking to the Democrats, or vice versa, that's going to harden, partisanship on this issue, that we should be able to come up with something together. So I think it's a reflection of the fact that that we've gone back into our corners, Democrats and Republican, on what's happening in Israel and Gaza. Not a great thing.
Of course, aid for Israel is also wrapped up in this entire supplemental question. Christy Setzer and Lauren Tomlinson, great to have you both this evening. We appreciate your time. And of course, for more coverage on all of these topics and more, check out the Washington Edition newsletter. You can find that on the terminal, and you can find it online as well.
We'll meet you back here tomorrow. Thanks for joining us on Balance of Power, only on Bloomberg TV and radio.